Hello and welcome to the Deep Dive Perspective. It's all about the West Asian region and the possible war that is going to kick off, and one which could become a regional fire which catches ablaze and actually draws in the rest of the world. This is the fear because the US isn't backing off. It has a whole armada, as Donald Trump puts it, based now in the Arabian Sea. And of course, it's got its existing US bases. What are the implications of this war for trade around the world in particular? Of course, the first thing that comes to mind is the humanitarian crisis that might kick in, but actually the markets will be quite unforgiving, one would expect, if the Hormuz Straits, for instance, were shut down, and if the allies of the Islamic Republic of Iran, like the Yemen, were also to say, close down the Bab al-Mandeb once again. How much of an impact would this have on ordinary lives in Europe and beyond, in China perhaps? With me to break down what these kinds of implications are and what could happen and what is happening, Alex Krainer, expert financial analyst and geopolitical analyst as well, author no less too, and of course Reza John Vedadi, also an author and an academic who works in this area of geopolitics and this region particularly. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to join you today.
Thank you. And Alex, I'll start with you. What do you think is the implication of a war in the region? I mean, the drums are beating for some time now. First of all, do you think there's still a chance that it could be averted? And secondly, if not, what are the implications?
Well, thank you. I would say that there's a good chance that the war would be averted, and the reason why I say this is because evidently there's tremendous pressure being brought to bear on Donald Trump and his administration to go to war against Iran. But this is not a new thing. This is the third time that this has happened. First time it was in 2019. We'll remember when Iranians downed an American drone over the Persian Gulf. And then suddenly there was all this pressure to go to war against Iran, and Trump declined. The second time was in June of last year, 2025. Again, Trump did attack Iran, but it was literally a 25-minute attack with about 40 missiles in total that was pre-announced 48 hours. So it didn't really do anything. I kind of predicted that before it happened. I said either there will be no war or there will be a fake. American viewers will understand when I say World Wrestling Federation type of war. You know, lots of noise and fireworks, but nothing really that would happen. And I said at the time that we would know for sure by the way the Iranians retaliated. And so Iran retaliated in a relatively polite manner, hitting one American base, destroying an American radar station, but no casualties. This is the third time. So if Trump wiggled out 2 out of 3 times in the past, I hope that he will find a way to wiggle out again. There's an assumption that Trump wants to go to a war against Iran. I don't think this is the case for a number of reasons. The most important one is that it will be absolutely suicidal and devastating because, you know, let's not forget that this is the military force that failed to subdue the Taliban. After 20 years of trying, this is the military force that failed to subdue Ansar Allah in Yemen after more than 10 years of trying through Saudi Arabian proxy and also directly. So the situation is very, very complicated. This is not a US neighborhood. They have their I think about 60 bases that are all within reach of Iranian missiles. We have seen during the 12-day war what the power of the Iranian military. We have not seen the power of Iranian navy yet, but Iran has been preparing for this clash for more than 20 years. is their home turf. The Americans are overstretched and unbalanced, and so there's tremendous risk of things going wrong. And I even assume that there's a very, very high likelihood that the moves are being coordinated between the Trump administration and the very top of the Iranian government. So this will not be known to journalists and the public in Iran, but the moves are being coordinated at the very top, probably through the Russian intermediation, and that again we will get either no war, or we will get a fake war, or we will get an announcement that some deal has been reached that has already been, decided in the past, that will only be announced in order to suddenly deflate the pressures. So military consequences could be devastating for the United States, and economic consequences would be extremely devastating on the whole rest of the world. So essentially, apart from the state of Israel and their owner, which is the still undead British Empire, nobody has any interest in this war. Not the Americans, not the Iranians, not the Chinese, not the Russians, not anybody in the region. So I think that for that reason, this is a lot of show, this is theater, and I think that some off-ramp will be taken in the near future.
Well, the first analyst who's given me some hope that war could be averted. So I'm grateful to you for bringing a little bit of kind of nuance to perhaps the whole discussion, because most of the analysts are all saying quite the opposite, Alex, and that's
yes.
There's
I appreciate that, but we were already at this stage about 2 weeks ago.
Sure.
When everybody, literally everybody out there was saying, next 12 to 24 hours, Trump is going to launch an attack on Iran. And 2 weeks ago, I was on Glenn Deason's podcast, and I said, it will not happen. Just watch what happens. Don't watch what the people are saying. Watch what happens. Nothing happened. So I think it's not, nothing is what it seems.
Yeah, I mean,
and so we have to look at what interests are involved, not go for the surface appearance of things. Anyhow, we'll see. We'll find out.
Well, it's always hard to look into crystal balls. None of us are magicians in that sense, but you're definitely having a brave stance on this one, and we can only hope that actually you're right, because the consequences, Reza, are quite unthinkable if this kind of war goes all the way. The kind of military hardware that's being lined up on the USS Abraham, if you like, and you've also got the various destroyers and the other arsenal that is lying around with Israel, because Israel won't be a kind of a quiet party. They've got their F-35s all lined up as well. It's a frightening array of military weaponry. And on the other side, the Islamic Republic of Iran has been accelerating its defense systems and its firepower as well. And that Hormuz Strait kind of constantly worries me, because it's the equivalent of a few nuclear bombs, as far as I'm concerned. Shutting the Hormuz down would have that kind of cataclysmic effect. And at the same time, Israel does have nuclear weapons. It does have a pretty psychopathic leadership, which seems to feel it's in an existential crisis of its very own, future, if you like, and therefore the fingers on the button and that old Samson option is there, isn't it? Do you think that there's enough of a control mechanism to be able to bring the Israelis and their Pax Judaica dreams to heel?
I think there's a few things they need to take into consideration before we get to this point, which is is there going to be war at this specific time or not? What we know for sure is that Israel cannot stand Iran as the state that it is now. And for 40, 50 years, it's tried to either topple this system, or it has tried to balkanize it, as we saw in the riots recently, and the plans that they have by working with various groups which try to seek some kind of independent provinces within Iran to become different countries. We know for a fact that the United States also is in that side that doesn't want Iran to be a strong, independent country. So it's against Iran's system as it is. Either Iran has to come into the fold of the United States as one country, or has to be balkanized as well, along with the NATO allies. We know that this is something that they've been working on for many, many, many years. And so the issue is, will there be an attack now, this week, next month? Is something that can be discussed, and maybe the times is not right for an attack now. But uh, there is a final battle. I don't want to sound like Star Wars and good and evil, but there is a final battle that's coming, that either Iran has to prevail or Israel and the side of Israel has to prevail. Reason being is, we know that Israel economy is in shambles, much worse than Iran's. Iran, no matter how bad the economy is, the people will not go into a flight and leave because they just can't afford to do that. They don't have those options, and most Iranians will stay, like they did in Iraq when there was a complete collapse of the country when the United States attacked in 2003. Even in Lebanon, where it's very hard at the moment to live there with all the economic problems and all the threats of war and so forth, Lebanese, most of them have stayed.
Yes.
Israelis, because many of them are either not born in Israel, don't have ancestor ties to the country, to the land. They came there for a comfortable life. They're going to leave. They're going to go back to Europe or America or wherever they can. Or at the moment, they're looking at Argentina and Greece and Cyprus and places like that. So that is one of the issues that Israel faces: economy and population deflation. Then you have the issue of how long can they continue to fight war, be funded by the United States. So there's this idea that Israel on its own is collapsing. A push from Iran make it collapse sooner, but even without a push from Iran, many Israeli analysts from within Israel are saying at this state, Israel will not survive into future. So we have the issue of Israel thinking that if I topple Iran, the big barrier ahead of me, whichever mechanism, so it could be through riots, internal conflicts, civil war, economic blockade, political sanctions, or even outright war, the aim is to topple it at some point, right? Or change the system in Iran so it benefits Israel as Syria has. Syria is no way able to prevent Israel from spreading. At the moment, I agree with Alex that United States doesn't have the strength to win any conflict that it starts at this moment, right? It may hit Iran, it may even damage parts of Iran, but ultimately Iran is very large. It has the capability of, you don't need to sink a carrier, you just need to damage it enough for it to go away, right? We saw that with the Yemenis, who have far weaker defense, but they were able to push the carrier to about 1,000 something kilometers away from Yemen, and they had to even maneuver against the more basic missiles that they had compared to the Iranians. Iranians have developed cruise missiles which are specifically targeted for warships. So even if the ship is moving, it can attack it. And they have those gunboats which are, they go at 100 knots per hour. They're very fast, and they have multiple rockets on them. So the defense of Iran is not going to be impossible. Americans know this. Israelis know this. So I think this is what Donald Trump, in The Art of the Deal, in his book, likes to cause chaos, mayhem, and from that chaos and mayhem and pressure, try to exert some kind of a deal. And I think Alex is right that Trump ultimately doesn't want a long-term war. He really looks for quick fixes or quick victories, because then he can then use them to promote himself. And I think ultimately his presidency is not necessarily there to enrich the United States or make United States a stronger country, or as he says, make America great again. It's there to enrich himself, as we have seen from the deals that his family makes every time he comes into administration. And it's also to enrich the oligarchs or those in power who. So this is where I think I may disagree with Alex a little bit, because I think that he does work for the oligarchs in the sense that we see they are the ones who are dictating US foreign policy. They're the ones who are directing how US strength is working. And this is a person who said, I'm going to halve the budget for the Defense Department, or sorry, the War Department now, I apologize. And now he has raised it to $1 trillion or more, or will be raising it even more. So who benefits from that? Clearly the industry, the military industrial complex. And he's enabled the high-tech Silicon Valley to start to take over the media with Ellison taking over TikTok, Paramount, and possibly Warner Brothers and so forth. So we see that there is some kind, the oligarchs, those who are rich. And if we went back a couple of 100 years ago, they would have been classified as the dukes, those who kind of propped up the king. The king on his own didn't have ability to control the country, but those feudal lords or the dukes that, five, six families that run, the England or whichever country they were running, they were the ones who would decide who's king. And then if they had enough of him, they would remove him, put someone else there. Because from behind the scenes, it's much easier to control when someone changes, but you continue the same policy. And you can see this because foreign policy of the United States hasn't changed for decades. No matter who you vote in, there's no change in foreign policy. The speed at which they try to do something changes. So we see with Trump, he tried really hard to remove Maduro first time. This time he literally went and picked him up and took him out, right? Others, like the Democrats, they do sanctions, they do, political theater, the UN, so forth, human rights, all of these things. So I know that there will be a final battle, but as Alex says, I don't think it will be any time at this next few months.
Well, some fascinating points, and I think this question of the oligarchs, both raised by Alex and yourself, Alex pointing to the City of London and perhaps old British money and British power perhaps still being very much part of the game. And of course, the Pax Americana, which is much more obvious, and then the coming Pax Judaica, which many people also want to push. There seems to be this little Anglo-Zionist empire, which, whether you call it one thing or another, ultimately all seems to be working in one direction. But the financial element, the cash which oils the military machine and then makes money. I mean, the oligarchs could make money out of peace. They make money when it's just ordinary trade. They also make money out of war. So, going back to the Rothschilds back in that classic period of the French Empire and the Prussians and the British Empire and the Russian Empire all vying for influence. Of course, the Ottomans were there as well, and Austro-Hungarian. You saw this play, and I remember there was this thing about the Rothschilds kind of being bankers of every one of these parties. Alex, have we got a kind of similar situation today? Because Mr. Putin's not averse to a few oligarchs surrounding him. People like Larry Fink are quite well embedded in China with the leadership, and of course you've got the Americans who are completely immersed in Wall Street and the oligarchical powers there. And as you said, perhaps the City of London. It's an interesting area because they're the same guys who control most of this arms industry, whether it's Lockheed Martin or go to the other side. They're going to make money out of war, and they make money when there's no war. Are we just in a sort of a kind of a status quo, whichever way we look as the public, that we're going to be exploited?
Well, these are all extremely relevant questions, and where do I start? Speaking about the oligarchs, yes, we have them. We will always have them. The very big difference is that in Russia and China, oligarchs are subordinate to the government, to the sovereign government of the country.
Right.
In the West, the governments are subordinate to the oligarchs. This changes everything. And if you look at the role of the oligarchy, they always push the country on a road to perdition. Basically, they destroy everything. We saw this very clearly on the Russian experiment during the 1990s. And then in 2000, Vladimir Putin comes to power. He lines up all his oligarchs in March of 2000, and he tells them, new set of rules, you have to stay out of politics. And then Russia suddenly has this spectacular turnaround, going from a complete basket case, one of the most corrupt countries in Europe, where average salary was, I think, $56 a month, to a basically, if not a superpower, then definitely a global power to be reckoned with. Now, you are very right to mention the Anglo-Zionist empire, because this is exactly what we're dealing with. If you look at today's drive to go to war against Iran, it would appear to be coming from the Zionist circles, from Israel and from the, let's say, pro-Zionist segment of the American political sector. And we have to always keep in mind that, while Zionism was kind of grafted into the American political system, that it has always been a project of the British Empire. And they never gave up on, they withdrew themselves, they became less visible. But if you pay close attention, the British are very closely involved with all of this.
Okay.
So they support Israel, they fly their spy plane missions over Gaza almost on a daily basis to provide in real time targeting and intelligence to the Israelis. They train Israeli officers, they send their special troops to Israel to help with the operations in Gaza, and on and on and on. The media, for some reason, doesn't like to discuss any of this, but that is a fact and it's on record. Now, if we go back to 2019, what we learned was that it was the British who were the main driver behind maneuvering Trump to go to war against Iran.
I see.
Because at a certain moment, Trump said, no, I don't want to do this. And then a few weeks later, we had a bunch of cables between the British Embassy in Washington and the Foreign Office in London leaked out by Anonymous. And what we learned from those cables is that the person who was coordinating this pressure to bring on Trump was the British ambassador, Sir Kim Darroch. And when Trump declined, what we saw in these cables is that first, Kim Darroch was very upset that Trump declined to go to war against Iran. But he also was saying that the British embassy was effectively cultivating a number of so-called Trump whisperers. And what he was saying is that Trump could still be influenced if we, quote, flood the zone against him. And then the first time that Iran does something in the region that could justify going to war, it will be possible to again pressure Trump into pulling the trigger, as he did with the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani. And so we know where that pressure is coming from. And I think that you're completely right. It's exactly the Anglo-Zionist empire. And so, the reason why I have been always predicting we will either get a fake war out of Trump or no war at all is because I came to the conclusion that Trump is not in that camp. Trump is not their player. Trump is actually quite strongly opposed to them. But Trump has a very complicated political situation at home. And that is that he has a very powerful, very passionate, and very wealthy voting segment in US political system that are the Zionist Jews and the evangelical Christian.
Right.
And this group, which constitutes, I think, between 60 and 70 million voters, are very passionate supporters of the state of Israel. And if you look at the ideology, particularly of the Christian evangelicals, their devotion to Israel is practically fanatical. And if you're perceived in the United States as not being supportive of the state of Israel, they will label you Antichrist.
Right.
It's not a small thing. And so, this year, so we're less than a year away from the next elections, the midterm elections, which are absolutely critical for Trump's entire project. He can't alienate this voter bloc, so
Right.
he has to pretend that he's a great, unwavering, completely loyal supporter of Israel, but then find a way to wiggle out of the war. And so far, 3 times he did. We'll see whether he will manage this time. I think that maybe the Russians and the Chinese will help them, as they seem to be doing with their, military exercises in the region. Give him some pretext to give up without pulling the trigger. This has already, we have the acronym named that says TACO, right? Trump always chickens out. it's not that Trump chickens out. It's that Trump never wanted to do this to begin with. And then I will also, the one thing that I will disagree with Reza is on Trump's motivations. We can't really put this into our analysis because we don't know.
No.
So this is highly inflammatory. It doesn't serve purpose because it's an easy conclusion to go to. But if you understand the American system, the way to enrich yourself is to sit back and to be a political donor. So you donate, Trump is already a billionaire. You donate money to the Republicans, you donate money to the Democrats, and you get deals. You get deals of whatever kind you want.
Sure.
And billions, tens of billions are going to be coming your way. You just have to go along with the system. Trump has put himself as a major disruptor to the system. That's not an obvious or an easy way to enrich yourself. So I think we have to look at the clash of interests between two systems of governance. This is what already George Soros announced that this global conflict is about. What are the two systems of governance? Well, we already know that it's the global free trade system championed by the British Empire since 200 years.
Right.
And it's the political the system of national political economy, otherwise called as the American or Hamiltonian system. We didn't really know where Trump stood for sure until this summit in Davos 2 weeks ago, where the American delegation, numbering 300 members, declared openly that they are embracing the American system of political economy.
Right.
This is not a small thing. This is not just like, oh, I guess you're going to go with a different system of governance. Well, good luck. Let us know how it goes. All 8 American presidents who were either assassinated while in office or died under mysterious circumstances while in office tried to implement the American system. American Civil War 160 years ago was fought over this issue. Slavery was downstream from that.
Right.
So this is critical. Trump administration explicitly and openly declared, we're going with the American system. Jamieson Greer, the trade secretary in Davos, gave a presentation in which he explicitly mentioned Alexander Hamilton, Abraham Lincoln, Lincoln's economic advisor, Henry Carey, who articulated the American system in a book called The Harmony of Interests, published in 1851. So this is so big. The stakes over this couldn't be any bigger. So it's not going to be about Trump making a couple of billion here or there. He could have done that sitting back in Florida and donating money to the Clintons, Obamas, and other politicians in the United States. The stakes are much, much bigger.
Well, that's a really huge area that you've opened up, Alex, and it ties in my mind to the rise of the Eurasian axis, the whole BRICS thing, and then
Absolutely.
how that plays out. Maybe we'll talk about that in a second program in detail. I've got that in my mind. But coming back to you, Reza, really winding and concluding this analysis of the potential war in West Asia, the big war, the great war that you're talking about. My friend Sheikh Imran Hussein likes to call it the Great War as well, and he's a fan of the Pax Judaica emerging to dominate the world. But coming to Iran itself, because what we've seen really in most of the post-revolutionary Islamic governance, I don't call it regime like a lot of people do. I do give them credit for being a religious democracy, much as that may not sit well with a lot of my secular democratic friends. The fact is that they do have a form of democracy under the system of Velayat-e-Faqih, and its majority time has been spent under the reformist rule. People like Ayatollah Rouhani or people like Khatami or for that matter, that Mr. Pezeshkian are not principalists, are they? And they have been trying to look west in a lot of their policies. And in fact, that's one of the major political grounds of dispute within Iran. And now we're at this juncture where those kinds of laissez-faire policies, diplomacy, go softly, don't make the nuclear weapon, try to create a means through the JCPOA of wiggling out of this kind of the rules that they're trying to set around nuclear weapons. Well, all of that's ultimately led to the same situation. Lots of sanctions, trying to sort of create secessionist movements, trying to create sort of color revolutions, from as long as the revolution has begun, inflicting the Iraq war, the first Gulf War on Iran. I mean, those policies, if you like, could be pushed now by a lot of the principalists to say, well, where has it got us? And why don't we have a much more robust stand against America? What's going on internally there in Iran, do you think, or in this circumstance? Do they want war?
So I think the Iranians, they've never wanted war because they know how destructive war is. The 8 years of war with Iraq demonstrated that it sets back a country. Obviously, there's things that a war causes other than loss of life. It causes stagnation in the growth of a country. And so, but obviously they also had a learning development from that war. And they learned that they have to be, so you have two segments in Iranian society that you could call them the ones who are Inqalabi. Inqalabi means revolutionary, who keep bringing back their ideas to the principles of the revolution, which is independence for Iran, self-development for Iran, and a country that neither looks to the east nor to the west. It's independent on its own. And then you have those who either educated in UK, for example, President Rouhani, or educated in the United States, for example, Foreign Minister Zarif, and others who seek to import liberal economic systems into Iran to integrate Iran with the West. Now, their camp has been very unsuccessful in the sense that, as you said, they had multiple terms to be able to implement this initiative. But the Western economies, the UK, Europeans, and the United States blocked it, did not want that to happen. Because the country still was the head of it, the Rahbar, the leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, who is a revolutionary at heart. And it's his revolutionary ideas of that independence that saved Iran in the 12-day war. And what I mean by that is it was Iran's weapons that they developed themselves, the mechanism by which they were able to bring Israel to its knees were weapons that Ayatollah Khamenei said after the Iran-Iraq war in the late 80s that we will not go and purchase when the Soviet Union, as Alex rightly discussed, kind of fell apart and it became Russia and all the other countries. There was loads of Scud missiles and missiles for cheap, $10,000, things that would have cost millions for sale. And someone in Iran said, let's go and buy these as many as we can because these are going to be useful for us. He said, no, buy only to reverse engineer and then learn how to research and develop it yourself.
Right.
Which what they did, and over 20, 30 years, even with the reformists or the Western-looking politicians like Rouhani and others preventing that, they would not provide budget for development for these missiles. And yet Iran was able to somehow get through, develop its weapons to the state that it could defend itself. Some places lacking like air power, like planes and stuff like that. But at the moment, it's still a power in the region using those missiles and drones. And so we've come to the point where a lot of Iranians have been disheartened by what they saw Rouhani and Pezeshkian and Khatami had done. All of this pandering to the Western governments, all of this giving up uranium enrichment, all of these things have brought nothing but misery for them. And so they said, oh, if you go down our route, there will be no war. There's no reason for them to attack and kill us and so forth. But that's what happened, right? It was during Pezeshkian's, which is a West-leaning president, who the attack happened. It wasn't under Raisi. It wasn't under Ahmadinejad. And so I think a lot of the kind of West-leaning politicians and the ideas have now been in front of the Iranian public, Iranian voting citizens, have been weakened. And so now they have had enough. So now what they want is actual progress without it being towards the West. And now that's why a lot of people, when I was in Iran a week or so ago, and I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and he was saying that the train route between China has set up, and it's going to be a routine train where commodities will be coming from China all the way up to Iran. And so that trade will, help Iran stabilize, and that China is going to turn towards yuan and not use the dollar anymore. And the guy sitting on the table next to us says to me, so does that mean, so he was interested, he didn't, now, this was a guy who probably wasn't too bothered about, the issue with hijab and stuff like that. He was more concerned about economy right now, because right now in Iran, you can walk about without hijab. So the hijab issue is sorted. People are having parties. Like if you go, one day Alex will come to Iran, he'll see. It's not what, those issues of hijab, that's all finished now. People only care about economy right now. And so if China and Russia are able to strengthen Iran's currency and progress its economy, they're happy to go towards China. China isn't seen that, East country where it's undeveloped. No, people have gone to China and see how developed China has become. And now they're happy to do business with China, Hong Kong, Russia, and any other country. The West isn't. So for some, it's still the West, has been idolized and will stay like that. But I think what's happened now, these wars and the negotiations and the backstabbing during negotiations has proven to the Iranian nation that you don't need to look to the West anymore. The world is much bigger than just the United States and the UK and Germany. There's a whole world. There's India. There is Korea. There is, even though Korea is, with the West, there is China. There's all of these countries, Brazil, South Africa, Russia, that are developing, and Iran can grow working with them. Not necessarily saying I'm going to align myself with the East, but saying that I don't need to wait for the West anymore. I will work with whoever I can, my neighbors and further out as well.
Well, Alex, I'm going to extend the conversation because you guys have brought so many fascinating issues up. It'd be a shame not to sort of explore them and to give the public a bigger picture. So given this mood in Iran for pushing ever further forward with the Eurasian axis, with the Shanghai Cooperation, with the BRICS, with the whole Belt Road Initiative, and of course with their sort of comprehensive agreements that are emerging both with Russia and China, the trajectory is clearly already set, that they seem to be very much in that direction. And now this war and the Zionist lobby forcing Iran to break any possibility of rapprochement with the West, further sanctions by Europe even this week. They're shutting down the situation even more. The IRGC, etc., are all being proscribed, etc. So it just seems to be accelerating this distance between the West and the Islamic Republic of Iran. And the other way seems to be, of course, becoming more and more, if you like, the future. And that, I think, also is manifested partly what you mentioned, these exercises, and the Chinese, Russians and Iranians have done naval exercises on a regular basis. Very interesting that they've suddenly decided that these exercises are going to happen within the next 2-3 days. And if those exercises begin, it becomes impossible for the American Navy to act and start firing on Iranian vessels, because then Chinese and Russian vessels could be caught in the crossfire, and there it is. So I can see where you were going with this in terms of the logic. So Trump had a very small window to attack on this occasion, and by leaving it another few days, it might mean that actually that window is completely gone. But I'm more interested in this kind of deal-making possibility. And of course, with China and Russia, you're in the business of the world markets. Is there a genuine multipolarity that's emerging, or is this also part of the deal-making? Because China has a very complicated relationship with America, of course. America relies on Chinese, debt, basically, buying of its debt or whatever. I know that. I know that the Americans, by shutting off these oil pathways, by Venezuela, for instance, I could cite, and Iran and the Bab el-Mandeb, these would all primarily affect China, because Russia has its own oil. It doesn't care that much. The Chinese would be massively affected. So in a way, indirectly, these are wars against China. They're like America's indirect battle with China. Is that how you see it? Is Iran also part of that jigsaw of the bigger battle with China, which the Americans are more concerned about?
You're right, but I would add a nuance because again, we always have to keep the perspective of the conflict between two systems, right? So I think it's never correct to say America against China or America against Russia or whoever against whoever,
Yes.
because neither one of those powers is a monolith, and the United States is not a monolith. Let's say, under the Clinton, Bush, Obama, Biden administrations, the United States was always part of the Western empire. They were their military enforcement arm. Under Trump, it doesn't appear to be so. And so, if we look at the current tensions in the Persian Gulf, we have to ask ourselves: does Trump really want to attack Iran, or is this bluster? Is this all fake? Because Trump. It's my advice to everybody is don't listen to what Trump says, because that really can cause brain injury. It's best to look at what actually happens on the ground, because Trump, when he speaks, he's always speaking to some audience, some particular audience. And that may not be the wider public. That may be the bankers, that may be the European allies, that may be the Russians, the Chinese, the whoever. And then he's not telling them how things are. He's giving them some kind of an impression that he wants them to get. So forget trying to discern anything from what Trump or members of his administration say publicly. Trump is talking a tough, practically, trash talk against the Iranians at the moment. But if we rewind the clock to June of 2025, after that 25-minute war, he was thanking the Iranians for their polite retaliation, and he was publicly and explicitly saying that he's not interested in a regime change in Iran. Of course, the British and everybody in the globalist camp is keenly interested. The British Empire, the Zionist project, probably good part of their allies in the United States, Wall Street bankers, big oil, and so forth. European powers, NATO, they're all keenly interested in regime change in Iran. The question is, where does Trump stand? My impression is that he's not with them, but you have to kind of make up your mind. When do you think Trump is being sincere, and when do you think he's running some kind of a deception? It's not easy to discern. But if we go back to the clash between two systems of governance, I think that's the key that unlocks all of these mysteries. Now, when it comes to economic questions and trade, and Iran basically giving up on the West and completely going with the Eurasian integrations and trading with Russia and with China and with India and so forth, that is an obvious choice, but it's not a simple one.
Right.
And this is, if you look at why do the Chinese and the Russians not just simply kick out the IMF and the World Bank and just shut them off and go with a completely new alternative system?
Yes.
Because then you're choosing all of your potential partner, you're forcing all of your potential partners to make a choice. We go with this system or we go with that system. And that's not easy for any of them, because practically the whole of the global South is still very much US dollar dependent. It's still very much dependent on the old trade relationships that have decades of, they have been established over decades. They have debts defined in US dollar terms with Western financial institutions. A lot of their revenues depend on those. So I think an easier approach, rather than breaking down this system and establishing a brand new one, is to try to co-opt, and so what the Chinese and the Russians have been trying to do is they've been trying to reform the IMF. They've been trying to act from within the IMF, which is obviously very difficult because you have other vested interests in there that are going to be extremely resistant to that. But this is where, the new relationship between Russia, China, and the United States could change everything, because the Western globalist imperial system with the United States on board is very powerful. If the United States changes the camp, if they switch flags,
Yes.
then the Western Empire is nothing. But that's going to be a period, that's going to be a long period. And, Sergei Karaganov, the, Russian intellectual and often close advisor to the Russian government, he said it, and I think that this is completely the right sense. What the Russians are trying to do, and the Chinese, is that they say it's once Trump won, they said our role now is help the United States to transition from being a global hegemon to being a normal regional power, normal global power, in the least disruptive way possible.
Right.
And I think that this is exactly what they're doing. And I believe that Donald Trump and probably a small group of people around him are their partners in this. But that the US administration is still very much in thrall of the old entrenched Cold War, Cold War warriors, people who are completely brainwashed into the idea that Russia bad, China bad, British and the European powers are. So that's going to be a process, and it's going to be a long process.
Sure.
And we see that from somewhere, you have coordinated, well-funded, well-organized attacks on the American system, trying to destabilize the American government. Things we see through these No Kings protests, to these events going on in Minnesota now. We see that the United States at the receiving end of a new 21st century opium war, because on both their southern border and their northern border, they're surrounded by drug cartels that are not only funneling enormous amounts of narcotics into the United States, but also are running the logistics for tens of millions of illegal immigrants that have been getting into the United States, as well as weaponry. So there's a concerted attack on the United States, because the United States has to either remain in the globalist camp, the one world global order, which is certainly headquartered in the city of London,
sure,
or the multipolar integrations. If the United States switches sides, then plan B for them is to destroy the United States, as they tried to do in the 1860s, when they wanted to break the Union,
yes,
pit South against the North,
yes,
and turn both of those entities into weak client states of the empire. So now we're back. How did Abraham Lincoln prevail at the time? With the help of the Russians. Russian Tsar Alexander II sent his Baltic fleet to New York and his Pacific fleet to San Francisco, where they anchored for 6 months to disable the intervention of the French and the British in the US Civil War on the side of the South. And so now again we have practically the same conflict playing out in a new version, where the Trump administration is pitted against the European powers primarily, where the Russians are in the background actually trying to help the Trump administration, or at least the Trump team, to transition to their side and prevent the United States from being destroyed, or his administration from being destroyed, or them being again co-opted back into the globalist camp.
That's an absolutely fascinating and one of the most nuanced looks at what's really going on. And it was really important because, though, well, as you said, it's very easy to fall in the black and white, this camp and that camp scenario without the context. And that's given a lot of food for thought, certainly for myself as well. But Reza, I'm going to finish as we come to the end of the show, but I'll come to you to refocus on the implications for the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is what we've been in a way contextualizing. And of course, the Israelis and the Zionist forces, they want certain things. They want no more uranium enrichment on Iranian territory. They want no more possibility of nuclear weapons even being, vaguely possible in their creation on that soil. They want the ballistic missile program to be rolled back or restricted in some way, for sure. They want Iran to stop supporting any of its allies in the region, Yemen, be it Iraq or be it in Lebanon. Now that is their objective. Trump is obviously the tool that they want to use because they know they can't do it themselves. As with the 12-day war, they could see that they would be wiped out pretty much by the Iranians. So given that kind of impasse, and given the kind of scenario which Alex has painted, and also given the fact that Iran now, if it falls further into the camp of the revolutionary principalists, the original idea of the Islamic Revolution was attacking some of the things that Alex also is alluding to, i.e. the interest, the usury-based economic system, the World Bank, and all of this would be probably anathema to Ayatollah Khomeini in terms of his vision of an Islamic state. And the Islamic State economically has a very specific role, zakat and lifting people out of poverty, quite sort of nationalizing industries, I guess, perhaps, buying out of the global banking system. That's all great in terms of an idealism, idealist, if you like, vision. But would it give Iran the future that perhaps it wants, given that already, these sanctions have been throttling Iran and causing the pain and the chaos within the people, which made them come out in the first place a few times. Do you think that even going down that revolutionary path will end up giving Iran the same kind of headache it's had with, I guess, the reformists who wanted a more of a neoliberal buy-in to the World Bank, to a buy-in to the global economic system, the WHO? I mean, they pretty much want to work with all of those international institutions, which in my opinion have lost credibility, quite frankly, over Gaza and many, many other issues. Do you think Iran stands in the middle, and anybody that, they say somebody who stands in the middle of the road is inevitably going to get run over? What do you see the future being for Iran?
Well, you have to look at the fact that if the system that the West-leaning camp wanted to buy into, would it pay off? Would it make Iran a successful, independent and sovereign state? We just have to look at what happened to Ukraine. It took the side of the Western camp, and we see what's happened to the country. You have to look at, for example, Germany that bought into the after Second World War, and now look what's happened to its industry. The fact that it can't get cheap gas anymore. They're buying American gas at much higher rates, and they're telling the Americans, we can't continue heavy industry if gas prices are like this, energy costs are so high. They're like, no problem, just produce them outside of Germany, produce it somewhere cheaper. So if Iran buys this into the Western, and we can see in the UK, everywhere you go now, inflation, cost of, at one point, if you were earning £95,000 a year, you were considered quite wealthy, you were considered quite well off, maybe 10 years ago. That people in the UK, family, friends were saying, look, £95,000 income is not enough for one family in the UK. So if we want to buy into the Western-leaning system of governance and economic management, we can see that it's not really working. There's lots of problems. So then you say, okay, what was the aim of the revolutionaries? Aim of the revolutionaries was to give the citizens of Iran access to the resources that belongs to the country, that are in the ground of that country.
Sure.
And using those resources make that country, those citizens, make that country strong, sovereign, and independent. Now, as I said, one example of where it worked was the missile and the drone technology and capabilities of Iran. That was completely indigenous. Yes, they brought some weapons in, they reversed engineered some of them, but it came to a point now where they developed technology, and we can see how many countries have copied the Shahed 136. Very simple technology, but very effective, that has impacted the state of the war in the world. And the idea of, if they have superior technology, we need to just overwhelm them with much cheaper, inferior, that will just change the equation and the reality on the ground. So all of these things were from the revolutionaries, right? And so you think, okay, so the revolutionaries, they come into the economy as well. What will they do? The aim of, I believe, of the revolutionaries, those who want to benefit the country without enriching themselves to the state where the Western, because we have lots of wealth in Iran. Iran doesn't have an issue with wealth or resources. What it has an issue is mismanagement. Yes, I also believe the sanctions have an impact, but I also believe that there's been enough corruption and mismanagement within those groups who've come into power and who have siphoned off money and took it outside and invested it and so forth and so on, that it has impacted the confidence of Iranians, the confidence in the currency, and the confidence in developing its own economy. If you go to Iran, you go to a shopping, to a store to buy food, for example, you find everything's manufactured in Iran. Yes, there's Turkish versions, there's Iranian versions. And some of them are as good, if not better, than ones you find in Turkey or in Europe, right? So Iran doesn't have an issue with development of industries. It's producing the Siemens decided not to give turbines to Russia for its gas industry, and so Iran started to produce it for them. So the issue is Iran capable of advancing as a country in developing? The issue is, which system, as Alex rightly says, does a country decide to choose? Does it try to choose a system that is controlled by City of London, where its whole aim is to enrich itself at the expense of others? Or is it going to try new ideas that, for example, China has done, that it brought 800 million people out of poverty in space of 30 years, in space of 3 decades? Something that you can't comprehend if you live in the West. They brought more people out of poverty than the whole of population of the European Union, right? On the whole population of the United States.
Yes.
So there are different mechanisms by which those who seek to benefit Iran are now trying to promote those ideas, trying to promote that within the population. And I think the population, unfortunately, had to go through a very painful wake up. They had to suffer a lot to realize that maybe there's some things good about the Western system, i.e. the fact that, Western system does align itself to higher standards in certain things. Fine, no problem. But why can you not mix things to develop a better system for yourself? Not just look to one direction. And I think those who are starting to look to the East, that doesn't mean, as I said, it's not going to be completely everything to the East. I think what's happening is they're looking to see who will work with them, North, South, West, or East. And they will work with those. And this is something that Raisi started during his 2-3 years. He said, we don't have a problem with negotiating with the West to deal with the West and work with the West. Our only issue is we will work with whoever is working with us. We won't wait around to come to an agreement with the West. Whenever they're ready, we'll sit down and talk. Meanwhile, he started to build relationship with his neighbors, 11 neighbors around Iran. That itself, working with those countries, will increase Iran's economy and export by huge amounts. Forget the fact that it can do, it could work with Africa, and it could work with Latin America, South America, and the rest of Asia, right? Not just in the sense that it could give them commodities like oil and gas, but Iran can become a powerful engine of economy and production as well. And it's demonstrated that. So I think now that the people have realized that these countries in the West, even if you side with them and invite them to invest in your country, that does not mean it's going to better your country. What it means is you give them full-blown access to your resources, and it may probably be at your detriment. Who is it that said keep America? You should keeps this. What is it? It's dangerous to be a friend. No, it's dangerous to be an enemy of America, but it's fatal if you're its friend.
Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger.
Yeah. Well, thank you, gentlemen. You've both done a splendid job in unraveling some really, really difficult and complicated issues. And of course, it's not going to end there. I'm sure we're going to have to revisit this, because I do find this area of systems of governance really important and something which is under-discussed. Very rarely will you get the opportunity to have this kind of discussion. And I don't think we scratched the surface of a lot of the deeper issues that underlie this new system, whatever it may be. But the globalists, the people at Davos, and those people who I identify as the ones Alex has also pointed to being linked to the old British Pax Britannica fraternity, etc., they certainly seem to be favouring transhumanism. They're favouring techno-feudalism, as Varoufakis calls it, I think. There's also their obsession with the Agenda 2030, something which is has got an entire program which seems to want elements of depopulation in favor of AI and the coming business system, the ID systems that are there, and of course net zero and the question marks that are coming up around all these kind of so-called environmental protectionist policies. There's so many questions about the system that the likes of Yuval Harari advocate, for instance, even in terms of being able to hack human beings with all this newfangled technology, and the likes of Elon Musk with their possibilities of brain chipping. This frightens me. This kind of future, the kind of vision which these people seem to have, is all centered around control and surveillance and in some way creating a dystopian future. To me, the more rooted traditions of Russia, perhaps Iran, where there's still the old human element there, the old idea of family, the old ideas of community, the old ideas of, having a world which is more pristine. To me, I'm a kind of a dreamer in that sense, and in a way a romantic. And I kind of would like some force to emerge which actually gave us a better balance between the technological craziness, which seems to be coming with AI and all the other things which are being bought into by these globalists, and that old world that we had. And we're on the cusp of a massive change, I think, which is probably a conversation with Alex and yourself that I'd like to probably come back to, techno-feudalism and where that future lies. That's another conversation perhaps I can tempt you with on DDP in the near future. But for now, thank you so much for unpacking that very, very complex issue in a not so sort of a black and white way. And it left for the audience to consider these things that have been raised and get beyond the stereotypes of hijab versus, bikinis, or get beyond the idea of sort of Iran as the bogeyman, or the Russians or Trump. All of these are questions. Critical analysis is necessary. Depth of research is necessary for you to come to real understandings. And please do like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And even Alex, I think he's on various channels. And John, we'll pop up your main places where people can find you, because your work is well worthy of greater analysis by everybody. Thank you for joining me on this edition of Deep Dive Perspective, and look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Goodbye.